And joining us now, Toronto City Councillor Adam Giambrone, the chair of the Toronto Transit Commission and a member of the Metrolinx Regional Transit Authority. Welcome back to TVO.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you, Adam. Okay, give us the sort of philosophical overarching vision of your 25-year, $50 billion plan. What's it about?
Well, Metrolinx started looking at the region of Toronto as one big region, stretching all the way from Hamilton out to Durham and north almost to the borders of Lake Simcoe, and took a look at what it was, the problems that we had now, and what it was going to be like, say, 25 years from now if nothing was done. And what the analysis gave us was a need to invest heavily, mostly in public transit, some new roads, but some $50 billion over the next 25 years just to basically keep us afloat and keep the region working as an integrated unit.
Can you give us the sort of handy-dandy example of, if we do this, your commute will therefore consist of what?
Well, I think it's more of if you don't do, because what $50 billion over 25 years buys you, and remember that over that 25 years, you get another 2 million people joining us in the GTA region. And if you don't do anything, you're going to have serious gridlock. People who commute today know that there are problems, but without $50 billion of investment, basically the region grinds to a halt, industry begins to suffer huge losses, and it really puts the whole viability of the GTA at risk. So you ask, what does that get you in terms of a reduction? Well, it gives you a couple minutes off your average commute. It doesn't look that impressive, and that's why you have to look at it the other way around, saying if you don't do anything, what's going to happen? And that story is pretty scary. Already $2 billion a year lost to congestion, and it gets a lot worse.
What are the potential environmental benefits of doing this?
Well, what the whole, if you look at it in two sort of phases. Metrolinx talked about the 25-year plan, which is more part plan and part vision, and then the 15-year sort of $30 billion plan that sees massive GO expansion, huge light rail in Toronto, some subway expansion, and then boosting the regional transit plans out in Mississauga, Durham, Hamilton to sort of create this network. And in terms of the environment, cutting massively the CO contribution from the transportation sector. It also allows people to really have a more environmentally friendly lifestyle by living close to transit and really being able to make more compact communities possible, and goes a long way to help us with our Kyoto targets.
Are there any, as in Young University, Spadina, subway lines deep under the ground planned for this new expansion you're referring to?
There are two subway expansions. Now, one is already underway and has been announced. That's the Spadina extension from Downsview north to York region. The other one, which is new to some people, although it's been talked about, is the subway extension north from Finch Station up to Langstaff, so just north of Highway 407. Those are the only two subway extensions envisioned in the plan. There is an extension to the Scarborough SRT, which may be light streetcar type technology, or we may see the new generation of the Bombardier technology out in Scarborough.
But those are extensions, not new lines.
That's right. So there are no new subway lines projected in this. It focuses on light rail in Toronto, regional GO service outside of Toronto, and then some light rail in some of the other communities, as well as BRT, bus rapid transit.
Given that people love subways first and foremost, and then I guess light rail, streetcars, buses in descending order. Given that there aren't subways as a part of the mix here, are you concerned that this will not be ambitious or aggressive enough to get people out of their cars?
Well, we've heard from cities. We had Paris here a couple weeks ago, and they were talking to us about their plans. And of course, Paris, which has an amazing metro system, is focused over the last 10 years on building LRT, or light rapid transit, streetcars in our terminology, and it's been incredibly successful. So subways are popular, they're great, they're also incredibly expensive, and they take a long time. If you want to look at something like the Eglinton line, which is going from the airport all the way to Kennedy Station, 31 kilometers. As a subway, it's a 15 to 20-year project, so you don't realize it in most people's working lifetime. As well, it takes somewhere between $8 to $10 billion to complete. So there is a trade-off, and the light rail has the capacity to grow transit in the GTA along with the GO expansion, and in the future, those corridors may justify subway expansion.
So if this all gets done, do you think at that point Toronto then would have, I don't know, you tell me, one of the 10 best public transit systems in the world, one of the 20 best? Do we crack the top 10 with this?
Well, we're the third largest in North America, behind Mexico and New York. We probably rank somewhere at 15 or 20 in the world. There's some really big ones. We're up in competition against some other cities that are doing massive expansions. Madrid, you look all over Asia with Beijing, there's huge expansions going on. So this will allow us to keep pace, and to be quite frank, it's probably not important to compare us against Tokyo or New York. It's important to get a transit system that actually works here and moves people. I mean, whether or not we're better than Tokyo or better than London, they're different cities, they're a lot bigger. What we need is something that actually works for Toronto and means that transit is actually a viable option for people. It's not just a mode of last resort.
Sure. Well, here's the big question. How are you going to pay for it?
Well, so it's $50 billion over 25 years. 30 billion over the next 15, which is sort of the critical implementation. The first couple of years, the provincial government has committed just over $11 billion to get the plan started. And then there's some real tough decisions. Remember that regardless of where the money comes from, whether it's road tolls in the future, whether it's a gas tax, whether it's general revenues, it is coming from the same taxpayer. I mean, general revenues come from you, the taxpayer.
Yeah, but it's a question of whether it's taxpayers or users. Obviously, that mix matters, right?
Well, it's never going to be fully users. Remember, the TTC has one of the highest cost recoveries in the world. 75% of the operating, but 0% of the capital come from the riders. So, you know, we can talk about operating, that's a whole nother question, but this is all, that 50 billion is capital projects for the most part. And that really has always come from government, has always had to come either from government or the private sector, but the private sector doesn't do things for free, and you end up paying for it, you pay for it in a different way, and it always comes out of government revenues. Ridership money can only really go to help subsidize the operating costs.
So the McGuinty government, as part of it, Move Ontario 2020,
yep.
it's ponied up its share of some money right now. How about the federal government?
Federal government is yet to commit. It was originally envisioned that roughly 1/3 would come from the federal government, which is the traditional formula, 1/3 municipal, 1/3 provincial, 1/3 federal. The provincial government's picking up the first 2/3, so there's no municipal component because the cities just can't pony up billions of dollars, but so far there's been no commitment from the feds, and of course the decision around next steps for financing is being put off until the 2012 window.
Are the local councils within the Greater Toronto Area not expected to pony up any money for this, for the capital?
Remember, these numbers are huge.
I know, but there's you know, 4.5 million people who live here, 5 million people.
And the local authorities are already picking up the bulk of the operating costs of these systems. And of course, when you build a bigger system, it costs more to operate. So that's really, if anything, might be picked up partly by the municipal government. There will be some small costs. Property acquisition costs will come from the cities, but I think the province heard very clearly that the cities were no way in position to put up any significant share of a $50 billion. Just not, when you collect only 6% of the tax revenues, which goes to the cities, you can't expect multi-billion-dollar investments in infrastructure. It's just not possible from the municipal base.
Okay, but if, some would call this a plan, some would call it an idea. It's an idea because it's not paid for. It becomes a plan when you figure out how to pay for it. I haven't figured out how to pay for it yet, so is it really a plan?
Well, the first 11 or so billion is committed to. In fact, we break ground on Shepherd, the first LRT line in Toronto, and there are other projects going forward in the 905 as well. I think our date is September 28th. I mean, we're working 2009. So we're moving very quickly.
But that's only 20% of the way there.
Well, that's only part of the plan. You're right. I mean, this is a long-term plan that ultimately stretches 25 years, and that's why those difficult decisions are going to have to be made at some point. It seems unlikely, and I can't speak for the provincial government, but it seems unlikely that the entire 50 billion is going to ultimately come from the province. That's a large amount of cash, and there's a lot of other priorities, but that's a decision that's now been put off to 2012.
Can you, what is it, $275 to ride the TTC right now, if you just drop a coin?
$225 if you're buying tickets, and chances are you are if you ride it on a regular basis.
I don't think they do tickets anymore. Isn't it tokens
well,
only?
Well, for seniors and students, we still do
Okay.
tickets, and of course, adults, we phased out the tokens last month.
Got it. For this bigger, fancier system in the future, I mean, is it within the realm of possibility you could be talking about a $5 ride?
No, because you can't come anywhere close. Even a $5 ride wouldn't come anywhere close to allowing you to have the revenue to debenture $50 billion. I mean, it literally comes into the ride of something like $15, $20 a ride. The numbers are so huge that you'd have to do. All transit everywhere in the developed world receives government subsidies. And in fact, the TTC receives relatively little, and the GTA properties as well. But in terms of capital, it's just not feasible to do out of the fare box, regardless of what ridiculous price you put on it.
Okay. Since you've raised the TTC, let's talk about that. A couple of weeks ago, I don't have to tell you, you're the chairman of the commission, a cable fell from the roof of a subway station. It shut the thing down for 12 hours, I think.
Yeah.
There were thousands upon thousands of people streaming into the streets trying to walk home, hail a cab, get on your buses, which you put up at the last second, you know, walk, whatever, figure it out. Is it, does it make, I'm not even sure how to ask this, other than, you know, how can such a complicated, sophisticated system be so damned reliant on two wires not falling apart to the point where tens of thousands of people were inconvenienced that day?
Well, part of the system, the issue is the Young Line is such a critical piece of infrastructure. It's the largest transportation corridor in all of Canada. 35,000 people can ride the Young Line in 1 hour during rush hour. So when you have a problem, and you know, every piece of infrastructure at some point has a problem. There was no safety at risk ever in the case of the Young Line, but there was an infrastructure problem. A simple cable snapped, and it meant that a cable fell down to the tracks, which meant you couldn't run trains over that section, and it had to be repaired. So we see these things happening all over the world with different pieces of infrastructure. The problem is you don't often notice it. Here at TV Ontario, if one of your computer systems goes down, you may find that you have a problem getting on air, but you don't inconvenience 35,000 people. You run a rerun or something like that. Well, when we shut down, you notice it right away, and that one piece of infrastructure. So, you know, the TTC after 95 spent a lot of money on infrastructure. It doesn't always look pretty, and that's, you know, you hear that coming back, but structurally the tunnels are very sound. And we've...
Do you know Jeffrey Simpson from the Globe and Mail, the columnist?
Yep.
I'm sure you read him all the time. He was on this program not too long ago, and he said on that program, of course he lives in Ottawa, "I'm shocked every time I come to Toronto and ride the TTC," he said, "it is in such a state of disrepair." Do you think he's wrong about that?
I think he's talking about perhaps this cosmetically, although perhaps he hasn't visited Chicago, London, New York, or Paris, all cities. We like to compare ourselves, world-class cities with very similar subway issues. When you have huge systems, sometimes it's hard to keep them cosmetically beautiful, but structurally the TTC is very sound, and in fact has refused to do any expansion unless every piece of infrastructure was fixed. So you may find that it's not always the most beautiful looking system, but structurally, and you go to other cities, is in a good shape.
It's funny you say not the most beautiful looking. I mean, what's the thing you hear most of all about the subway stations? They
Well,
look like a public toilet, right? That's what you hear.
Well, but part of that was a design aesthetic from the 50s, so we can't totally ignore the fact that that was, even when they're in perfect shape, looking, gleaming, they still are very functional stations, a product of 1950s Toronto, and they're all being renovated, right? Pape and Victoria, the first two stations, every station being redone, totally gutted.
And I must say the museum and the Osgood, the ones near the museum and the Ballet Opera, they do look fantastic, those subway stations. Cities around the world are using very sophisticated methods of payment now, right? They've got flashcards and all kinds of things you swipe, and we are still here kind of with tokens and tickets and some of that stuff. Are we ever going to get up, you know, into something more sophisticated?
Well, they're working on it, and the provincial government has announced the Presto card, and they're leading this. We're a part of, obviously, we play a part in that. We are the largest provider, carrying 85% of the riderships in the GTA, but it is a provincial project, and they're working with Accenture, which is a large company, to implement this. We have to remember that in places like London and New York has magnetic card, London has a smart card. It took 7 to 8 years to implement. They started this about a year ago, we'll say, and we need to be realistic that it's coming, but it is still 5, 6 years away before you're going to be using the smart card to access every bus, streetcar, and subway in Toronto. You don't want to get it wrong. London's had these problems this summer where for whole days the system went out, and you know, every day that our system goes out, it's $3 to $4 million in lost revenue. So we don't want to get it wrong. Maybe good for riders on that day when they pass through into the system, but smart card technology is coming. But it is a big project. It's a massive computer program, and you need to expect it's going to be 4, 5, 6 years.
But is the idea at some point that this one smart card gets you on GO Transit, TTC, a light rail vehicle, the Scarborough Art, like the whole thing, everything in the system?
It likely will access every transit property, but you're still going to be paying double fare, right? It doesn't mean that from Mississauga coming to Toronto, you're only paying one fare. That's a multi-$100 million question a year in lost fare revenue. If the provincial government's prepared to come to the table with that, we'll see. But I think that it's going to be a difficult thing for them to do.
But it shouldn't mean you have to pay twice or 3 times, right? One card swipe should...
Well, no, you swipe once coming into the Mississauga system, and again, but instead of having to fumble for quarters and loonies and toonies, or tickets or your ticket in Metro, all that stuff, you have one card. It allows you, that's what they do in Montreal. You still in some cases pay different systems, but you actually have, you could buy one Mississauga pass on the card and one Toronto pass. You still have 2 passes. You've still paid twice. It's just this one card.
Okay, we got less than 2 minutes here, and I want to share a little pet peeve that those of us who work in the Young Eglinton area have with you. Let's roll this video if we can, Michael. There are 2 escalators within, I guess, about 100 yards of this studio right now at Young and Eglinton that have been under repair for, well, I guess about a year. And you can see how people are trying to shoehorn themselves in between that construction on the left of the shot. And, you know, there are usually 2 or 3 ways, I guess, to get down to the subway, but now there's one. And boy, what a zoo this is, and has been for over a year. I've been looking forward to having the chair of the TTC on this program so I can ask him, what in heaven's name is taking so long to fix that?
So you just have to thank yourself that you're not on the Shepherd line, where they're relatively brand new escalators that break down 3 to 4 times as much as the 40 to 50-year-old escalators. The problem is you can't buy a good escalator that works in these conditions, which means they all have to be rebuilt. They have constant problems. And as I say, we have more problems up on the Shepherd line with brand new escalators than we do on these ones. So it's a big process to keep the largest user of escalators in Canada up and running across the system.
You got a guess as to when it's going to be fixed?
On the Eglinton one, probably another couple months.
Another couple of months. Okay. I know you hear everybody's complaints, so you're a good sport to come in and take it from us too, but I do thank you, Adam Giambrone, chair of the TTC, for coming in and sharing your views about Metrolinx and the next 25 years of public transit in our city. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.